Oh wow, I look so red. Ring lights create a lot of heat, you guys, and I don't have makeup to cancel us out, so I'm sorry. I didn't feel like putting on makeup tonight. Anyway, hello everyone, welcome back. Thanks for being here. Today we're going to be talking about my favorite books from 2020, my top 10 favorite books. I am only allowing myself to do 10 because a bitch was very generous with the 5 stars last year. And not every single 5-star read does make it on my favorites list. I just wanted to narrow it down to 10 because otherwise I would go on forever, right? 10, and I'll be doing it from 10 is the least favorite of the favorites and 1 being the favorite of the favorites. I don't have physical copies for some of these books because some of them are out on Lend right now, so I will always be putting a picture on the screen so you guys can see what the cover looks like. Let's get into it. Make sure to like and subscribe if you want to, and let's get into it. So the first one is My Dark Vanessa, coming in at number 10. This is a book about a girl named Vanessa, and we follow her from a dual timeline from when she is 15 years old and when she is 30 years old. And when she is 15 years old, she ends up getting groomed and manipulated by one of her teachers to basically be in a relationship with her. And basically when she's 30, we follow the after effects of what happened in that relationship and how she still has contact with that teacher when she is 30 years old. Basically, and also when she's 30, another girl comes out saying that the same teacher also groomed and manipulated her too, and she wants Vanessa to speak up, but Vanessa does not feel like it is abuse or grooming or manipulation, so she does not want to speak out about her story. This is a very hard book to read, but I think that it's so important to read if you're going to mentally be able to handle it. It really talked about a lot of issues with the Me Too movement, saying that like sexual abuse is something that's so personal to the victims of it that you cannot pressure people to come out and say stuff about it if they don't feel ready to. And sometimes we as humans want to make that trauma sound like it's okay in our brains to make us cope better with it, and that's why Vanessa feels like it wasn't manipulation and grooming and sexual abuse. And we cannot judge victims for that because that is simply not their fault. Also, I think it talked about how not everyone wants to come out with their story and talk about their past, and that is completely okay because it really is none of our business. I loved this book. I really did. I feel like it's so hard to talk about it's hard to talk about positive things and negative things because I feel like in order for a book to be a favorite for mine, it's just based on how I feel, and that's kind of what it's easier to talk about the negative stuff. Like it's easier to say like, oh yeah, I hated that book for a reason, but I hope that I'm doing an okay job. I just felt like it was a favorite of mine, and I think that if you're mentally okay to read that book and it's not going to trigger you in any way, then I think that you should read it. Just know that there are major trigger warnings for that kind of stuff, as I stated before, so yeah. But if you want to experience it and learn something from it in your own way, definitely read it. Anyway, next up we have The Cruel Prince by Holly Black, coming in at number 9, and that is a YA fantasy, and once again, I'm very late to the game in this. A lot of people have read this before I did, so you probably are like, hey, we know what this book is about, and we know that it's a good book, but it's about this girl named Jude, and we flash back to when she is 7 years old and her parents are murdered and her and her sisters are kidnapped to go and live in the high court of fairy. 10 years later, Jude wants to belong with it, but many of the fae people do hate humans, including Prince Cardan. Jude wants to become a warrior in the court, so she has to basically defy Cardan in a lot of ways and face the consequences. The true key to my heart is an enemies to lovers romance placed, or the setting has to be in like a fairy world. That is an instant 5-star for me, and The Cruel Prince was no different. I thought that it was amazing. Jude is very morally gray in certain ways, and I just loved her. I thought that I could really relate to her a lot, and she is so strong-willed, and I think she's just a badass bitch, and I love her. And Cardan is a great love interest. I was fangirling multiple times for these books, which doesn't happen with me usually, so if I'm able to fangirl, it's always a plus for me because that never happens to me. And I cannot wait to read the next book. Next we have, at number 8, my first physical copy, Children of Blood and Bow by Tomi Adeyemi. This is a YA fantasy book about, our main character's name is Zelly, and she is living in the world of the Orishas, which means that magical gods, and they have a very big influence on Zelly's people. And when Zelly was a kid, her mother was murdered by the new king because he doesn't like magical people or people who can who have magical powers. Zelly has one chance to bring all the magic back, and she has to seek the help of a rogue princess while also outrunning the prince because he wants to kill Zelly and her entourage, basically. This book was so addicting, and I was so like wanting to keep reading, but I was also so afraid of the parts like that were coming up because I was so afraid of what was going to happen, which is always like a good thing for me. I feel like if a book's able to make me feel like suspense and scared, it's a good thing, which a lot of thrillers don't do for me, but for some reason YA fantasy does, right? I loved it. Tomi Adeyemi really put her characters through a lot in this book, and I felt so deeply for them, so I was definitely upset at some parts, and the pacing was perfect. This is quite a thick book. I think it's like 500 pages, and I didn't feel like it was at the end of it. I feel like I read like, it felt like I was watching a movie in my head, and I felt like I wasn't actually physically reading a book, and it was amazing. The way that everything flowed so beautifully and the way that everything was told as if it was like a TV show was amazing, and I think that her writing is beautiful, and I cannot wait to read the second book in the series, which I just haven't got to yet. Coming at number 7, we have A Curse of Dark and Lonely by Brigid Kemmerer. This is another YA fantasy, but this one is a Beauty and the Beast retelling, and it's basically about our first main character's name is Harper, and she hasn't had a good go at life recently. Her father has recently died, and her mother is very sick with cancer and on her deathbed, and her brother constantly underestimates her because she has cerebral palsy, which means that she has to walk with a cane, and it affects the way that her legs are formed and different parts of her body are formed. Which, amazing disability rep. Loved that. And our other main character's name is Prince Ren, and he is the prince of a kingdom, and him and his main guard named Gray have been cursed to relive the same autumn and winter seasons, and at the end of every single season of winter, if Gray or a friend has not found a woman to fall in love with him, he turns into a horrific beast and kills everyone and everything around him. But the catch is that Ren and Gray cannot die, no matter what they do. Harper finds herself being pulled into Ren's world and has to decide whether she's going to help Ren fall in love with him or try and find a way back to her regular world. I am usually not the biggest fan of fairy tale retellings because I feel like I can never separate the two. I feel like when I read a certain, like I recently read a Snow White retelling, and I feel like I was just constantly relating it back to the original fairy tale, but this felt like it was an original story. It didn't feel like it was a retelling of Beauty and the Beast. It felt like it was its own very dark, twisted original story, which I loved. I think that her writing was beautiful. I think that I loved Ren and Gray so much, and they were just so swoon-worthy, and I loved them. Harper is a very original main character. I really loved her a lot. I think that she was so strong and so like amazingly nice in that book, and she was so doing things for her own, like in her own way, and not worrying about the consequences and just doing it because it's what's the right thing to do. And I love characters like that so much, and I loved that book. And it focuses on a lot of different types of love, like whether it be familial love, friendship, love for your own people, as Ren is very much loving towards his people of the kingdom that he resides over and wants to help them, even if it means sacrificing himself. And I just love that kind of thing, where it's not just focused on love. That makes sense. Does that make sense? Coming in at number 6, we have Heart of Flames by Nikki Palpero. This is the sequel to Crown of Feathers, and it is a YA fantasy book once again. The first book is talking about a world once ruled by very powerful Phoenix Rider queens, and eventually the two sisters go to war, who are the Phoenix Riders, and basically disbands them and kills a lot of people, and now a new empire is ruling, and they don't like Phoenix Riders, and another smaller group of Phoenix Riders has come into play because they want to reinvigorate that lifestyle and have bonds with Phoenixes once again. And our main character's name is Veronica, and she is like 16 years old, and she and her sister Val are trying to raise Phoenixes. Basically Val does betray Veronica in a very, very awful way, and Veronica decides to go to the Phoenix Rider camp and dress up as a boy to get herself in the ranks and get herself trained to become a Phoenix Rider, while the Empire wants to kill them and destroy them for the good, or for good, not for the good, to end it forever kind of thing. This book was even better than the first book. I can't talk about what happened in this book because it'd be a spoiler, but this book was so much better than the first book. I still get the first book 5 stars, and I loved it, but this is a bit bigger and it has so much more in it, and everything that was not well developed in the first book was developed more in the second book. So like the romance was so much better in this book because it was more developed, like the plot was so much better, and I just loved every second of it. Nikki Palpretto, I think, was a debut author by the time the first book of that series came out, and she does not act like it at all. She is a very, very talented writer, and you can tell that she was meant to do this because she has always just been so solid of a writer, and I love that about her. And it took me like, I think, over a year to read the second book, and when I finally got to it, it just felt like I had no issue getting back into the world and getting back into what happened. I didn't forget a thing about it. It stuck with me for over a year, and I felt like I had no issue picking it back up again and just continuing on. Nikki Palpretto really makes the imagery so amazing in this book. Like, I have no trouble picturing what things look like and what different things look like in the book and different scenes and stuff like that. The same thing with Children of Blood and Bone too. Children of Blood and Bone too. They really make it seem like a movie in my head, which I feel like is just such a plus because it's so much easier to envision stuff like that. And once again with the fangirling over the romances. Love that for me. It's a very, very good series and I love it so much. Coming in at number 5, we have A Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. This book is about, our main character's name is Zachary Rollins, and we follow him from the very beginning of the story. He is like a 7-year-old boy who is walking home from school one day, and he crosses an alleyway, and he sees a door at the end of the alleyway that doesn't belong there, and it's very beautifully painted and intricately carved, and he wants to open it but decides not to. And then we follow him from when he is in his last semester of his master's program at college, and he goes into a library one day and he sees a book with no title and no author and no barcode, and he picks it up and checks it out. Not really check it out because there's no barcode, but he takes it, and the first page of the book recounts that scene of when Zachary is a kid talking about not opening up the door. And from that point he is put into the Starless Sea and put into a whole bigger plot than anything that he can tell, anything that he knows about. So I can see why people don't like this book. I get it. I just completely disagree with it. I read The Night Circus by her and I gave that 4 stars. I really just like Erin Morgenstern's writing, and The Night Circus definitely wasn't that good of a book because there's no plot to it. This was a total game changer for me. This did everything that The Night Circus didn't do for me, and I loved that. It was so much better than The Night Circus. It had so much more to it, and it's not even that much bigger than The Night Circus, but it had so much more put into it. Like, it was just so, like, beautifully laid out, and there was so much in the book. Like, I want to reread that book now because the fact that I know what happens at the end of it, so I feel like I can, like, piece everything together, like, while I'm reading the book, and it's just so amazing. Like, all the twists and turns were just amazing, and Erin Morgenstern's imagery is just amazing, and she just paints a picture that is just so beautiful, and I can't help but want more. So if you didn't like The Night Circus, I definitely recommend reading The Starless Sea, but I also understand if you don't like The Starless Sea. Coming in at number 4, we have Throne of Glass by Sarah J. Maas. Yes, I only read Throne of Glass this year. It's sad, I know. If you want me to describe it to you, it's a book about, our main character's name is Selena Sardothian, and she is enslaved in the salt mines to work for the rest of her life because of things that happened previously, and basically it is a very cruel sentencing. A lot of people don't make it out alive from that sentencing. And then one day Prince Dorian takes her from the salt mines to basically say, I want you to be my champion, to be in a competition to become the next royal assassin. And the catch is that if she wins and becomes a champion, she can only serve for 4 years and she gets her freedom and gets to go do whatever she wants to. I devoured this book in one day. It was that good. I know it sounds surprising, everyone likes this book, but I just loved it. I love Selena as a character. She's so badass, but also like so like funny. Sarah J. Maas writes romance so beautifully, and I really just was in love with the male characters in this book. I don't know whether I'm team Dorian or Cal, but that's okay. But I'm so excited to read more from her because I have only read this and Assassin's Blade by her, which Assassin's Blade was also a really good book, but I only wanted to put one on the list this year, but I just loved it. Coming in at number 3, we have Girls, Paper, and Fire by Natasha Neon. This is a YA fantasy again. Can you see that I like YA fantasy a lot? This is a book about where each year 8 girls are chosen to become the king's concubine, and our main character's name is Lay, and she is a paper caste, which means that she is the lowest of the low. So there's different castes in the world. It's like paper, there's moon, and there's steel. Moon is like middle tier, steel is the highest tier where they look like animals, and moon is kind of like mixed between human and animals, and then paper is all human caste. So Lay ends up getting taken from her family because she wants to be, or she doesn't want to be, because the people want her to be the first ever 9th girl because she has very yellow eyes and like golden eyes, which makes the king very intrigued by her. And then basically when she gets there, she ends up falling in love with someone and basically pulls her into this coup that can possibly change her life forever and maybe even kill her. This book took me by surprise, and I really loved the sapphic romance in this book, and I was really surprised by it. I really was not expecting it from this kind of book, but I just loved it. I mean, Leigh is such a very interesting character. She is very selfless and very warm-hearted, and I loved her. And the love interest, amazing. Loved it. The setting depictions were gorgeous, and the writing was very descriptive and didn't take away from the story at all for being like overly descriptive about certain things, and I just loved that. Natasha Lyonne's writing is very beautiful, and it ended on such a big cliffhanger that I cannot wait for the second book, because I already have it and I just cannot wait to finally get to it. See what I mean? Like, I feel like I'm having such a hard time talking about the positive things because I feel like it's just more of how I feel, and hopefully it's not too boring for you, but I'm having a bit of an issue talking about the positive things. Coming at number 2, we have The Graveyard Book by Neil Gaiman. This is a middle grade fantasy about a kid named Bod, which is short for Nobody Owens, and he was left in a graveyard as a baby because of stuff that happened to his family. His family was murdered by someone that he doesn't know, and he is left to be raised by the ghostly inhabitants of that graveyard. And his mentor is someone that's not very human but not very dead-like either. And basically the person who's trying to finish the job is trying to hunt Bod down again. And this book was amazing. The first 100 pages were kind of hard to get through. If you want to read it, just know that you have to stick it through, because I was expecting it to be like a 3-star from the first 100 pages, but once I got past that point, it was a complete 5-star for me. I just absolutely loved it. I cried at the end of the book. Any book that can make me cry is going to be in my top favorites, because I feel like it's very hard to get me to cry during books, so the fact that I was able to cry during this was just amazing. Bod was such an amazing character. His mentor was amazing. I loved all the characters throughout this book, and I just loved it so much, and I feel like it's just so underrated, and I can scream about it to the end of my time, basically. So if you want to read this book, just know that the first 100 pages are kind of hard to get through, but after that, you will fall in love with it. But I make everyone watch the movie with me if they don't want to read the book, because I just want to scream about this book till the day I die, basically. So I will cherish this forever, and I really bought this book on a whim because last year for Valentine's Day, my boyfriend took me to Barnes & Noble and he bought me some books. And I saw, oh, a signed copy, and I was like, oh, it's on my want to buy list, my Amazon wishlist, I should just get it. And then it ended up being one of my favorites of all time, and it's also signed by him. So I'm just like, I'm never gonna get rid of this copy. It's gonna be mine forever. If there's a fire one day, this is the first thing I'm taking with me, I'm not even joking. Like, please read this book, please. Okay, anyway, that concludes everything. I'm sorry if I didn't talk about it that well. Like I said, it's just hard talking about positive things about books because I'm just like, I don't really know how to talk about stuff like that. I'm very much easier talking about negative stuff, right? But I hope you still enjoyed it, and I hope that you liked my list. I hope that I gave you some good recommendations today, and if you liked it, make sure to subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Bye. My second favorite book of the year was And My Grandmother Asked Me to Tell You She's Sorry by Frederick Bachman. This is a adult contemporary book about, which is an adult contemporary book about a 7-year-old girl named Elsa, and her grandmother is her only friend. Elsa's mother has recently remarried a new person. They're having a baby together, so Elsa feels like she's being forgotten by them, and she is bullied by kids at her school. So her grandmother has created a world for her called the Land of Almost Awake, and it's filled with a bunch of different tales of people and rulers and like soldiers and stuff like that. And Elsa's grandmother dies in the beginning of the book, and basically leaves Elsa a series of letters addressed to people that she has wronged in some way, and asks Elsa to ask for her forgiveness. I love this book so much. It really made me cry many times throughout the book, and it really encapsulates being a child and going through grief and not really understanding why things work the way that they do, but also giving a lot of adult realness into that book too. So you can read it at any age. I really do recommend it, and I loved it so much. But anyway, back to the last clip of the video. I'm sorry. Goodbye. I feel like my number 1 is like no surprise to anyone, so I'm sorry if you're not surprised by it. But coming at number 1, we have, drumroll, A Monster Calls by Patrick Ness. This is my first time ever reading this book, was this year, and I also have this copy signed by him. Exciting. Anyway, this is a book about a kid named Connor whose mother has cancer, and he's having a hard time at school with bullies and stuff like that, and then one day a monster comes to tell him stories to help him in some way, but he doesn't know what it's about yet. An absolute 5-star for me. Absolutely 5-star. The movie is amazing. The book is amazing. The illustrations are beautiful. If I can find some illustrations and stuff like that, but it just is amazing. I literally, no matter what, I mean, I've watched the movie like 3 times now and I sob like every single time, and I just loved it. I mean, there's just no way that I couldn't love this book. The quotes are amazing in this book too. Low-key and probably make one of them tattooed one day because I just love it so much, and I could just scream about this till the end of time. Like, it makes me feel so sad but also so heartwarming and also so like untethered at the end of it, and I just am so fucking in love with this book. Like, please, if you have not read it, please read it. I'm begging you, please read it, because I just loved it. When I read the book, I make everyone watch the movie with me if they don't want to read the book, because I just want to scream about this book till the day I die, basically. So I will cherish this forever, and I really bought this book on a whim because last year for Valentine's Day my boyfriend took me to Barnes & Noble and he bought me some books, and I saw, oh, a signed copy, and I was like, oh, it's on my want to buy list, my Amazon wish list, I should just get it. And then it ended up being my favorites of all time, and it's also signed by him. So I'm just like, I'm never gonna get rid of this copy. It's gonna be mine forever. If there's a fire one day, this is the first thing I'm taking with me. I'm not even joking. Like, please read this book, please. Okay, anyway, that concludes everything. I'm sorry if I didn't talk about it that well. Like I said, it's just hard talking about positive things about books because I'm just like, I don't really know how to talk about stuff like that. I'm very much easier talking about negative stuff, right? But I hope you still enjoyed it, and I hope that you liked my list. I hope that I gave you some good recommendations today, and if you liked it, make sure to subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.